What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a PO Box, and I don't think Locals, Patreon. And all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. Well, Karl, I didn't even bother to look to see how many times that we've recorded at this point. If I had to guess, it's got to be 12, 15 times, I think. I should have looked. I apologize for not looking.
No, that's okay. It's I enjoy appearing on your show, so it's all good.
I love talking to you. Show or not, I could call you on the phone, but my thing is always we might as well record it because it's good content, and I'm always I'm curious what your thoughts are to what's happening in the world, and for people that are going to be listening on the audio side, let me just paint a picture of Karl's office right now. His American flag is upside down.
Again,
am I seeing that correctly?
it is again upside down. That just changed.
When did it change?
Well, this is the first broadcast with it that way. So, I mean, technically, I guess you could say today, but that's not actually true. It's the decision to flip it happened when I looked at the obvious issues that we have with what's going on now with our president and the supine, both Congress and people within the country, because we've got several pieces of information. So a couple of which you'll actually get to break an article that's in the queue. You'll get to break that news because it's not up yet. It's not posted yet. It's in the queue. And that is in relationship to the abject lies the Trump administration has run about deporting illegal immigrants and enticing them to leave. And by the way, not that the enticement was a lie, but the claimed results are lies. You've also got, of course, the craziness that's going on right now with Iran. I've spoken and written quite a lot about the so-called nuclear threat. Your listeners may not be aware of the physics, therefore facts, behind such claims, but they should become that way because this is not the first time this load of BS has been run on the American people by various presidents. Okay, I mean, we heard the same load of BS with regards to Saddam Hussein. And we may as well start there because that one actually is, I think, is one of the more salient things that you need to hear, because we've had a number of sycophants run around and warmongers, people like Lindsey Graham and Huckabee and people like this. Huckabee has a particularly nasty form of dispensationalism that he likes to peddle with regards to his view of Christianity, which, in my opinion, violates the Constitution of the United States when it's expressed as policy. Anyone, of course, is free to have whatever view of religion they wish. That's the nature of our Constitution and the First Amendment. What you're not free to do is to privilege one religion over another. And to the extent that you do that in the context of government action, it's illegal. And that's the end of the conversation. It doesn't matter which it is. Now, you have to take a distinction between a religion and a political philosophy that happens to wrap itself in the flag of a religion. Okay, those are not the same thing. One is protected. The other is arguably treason. Now, you can't really get there as a charge because the Constitution, again, the framers were very sensitive to the abuse of the word treason and the abuse of the offense of treason, because the British had this habit of hanging people for alleged treason. So the founders put some very stringent tests on that particular offense. And it is the only offense that is actually defined in the Constitution of the United States. It is only a overt act taken to further the interests of an enemy of the United States, which of course implies armed conflict is undergoing. And it must be an overt act witnessed by two or more physical people. You can't get there with what Mike Huckabee has advocated in the positions he's taken in Tucker Carlson and elsewhere, simply because it's not overt act, it's a position, it's a belief. And on top of that, we're not at war with Israel. So the argument that Israel has the right to take the entire Levant from the Old Testament anytime they feel like it by force is absolutely an affront to the Constitution and a disqualifier for him to hold any kind of constitutional office, including that of an ambassador. However, it's not treason. And so, there you go. But let's talk about this nuclear thing, because the nuclear thing is actually extremely important, and this will not be the last time this trope is run on the American people and used as justification for something that's not true. Okay. First off, no matter how much 60% enriched uranium you have, you cannot make a bomb with it. I don't care how much you have. You can make a nuclear pile with it, meaning something that will produce energy, will release energy, but you cannot make something that will explode. The density is simply not high enough. The percentage of fissile material is not high enough in 60% enriched uranium. So you could take any amount of it and put it together and you make a hell of a mess, but what you wouldn't make is a bomb. All right, so that's the first thing. Secondly is that because you have to have very high degrees of enrichment to make a uranium-based bomb, nobody does. There's been exactly one of those that has been set off in anger ever, and that was at Hiroshima. The second one, which we set off at Nagasaki, was not a uranium-based weapon. It was a plutonium-based weapon. And every other nuclear bomb that has been designed, built, whatever have you, since has been plutonium-based. And there are very good physics reasons for this, not the least of which is that plutonium is a separate element, whereas uranium has multiple isotopes. Plutonium is man-made, and therefore you can control the distribution of those isotopes at the time of production. Uranium, you cannot do that because you dig it out of the ground. So the other absolute fact is that power reactors used to make civilian nuclear energy, electricity, are absolutely unsuitable for weapons production. Yes, they make plutonium, but only one isotope of plutonium is usable for nuclear weapons, and that's plutonium-239. There are several others that are produced in a nuclear reactor. All of them are literal poisons to the production of bombs. Literal poisons. One tends to it produces a great deal of neutrons spontaneously. So as a result, if you make a bomb that has too much of that in it, and it's a very small percentage, small single digits, the bomb goes off before you want it to. When you go to trigger it, it fizzles. It's kind of like taking a firecracker and cutting the end off of it and lighting it. It doesn't explode, it fizzes. And that's because it causes the assembly to go critical before it all gets together. That one's bad. The others are worse because they're hard gamma emitters, which means that in the process of assembling the weapon, putting it on a missile or in a plane or whatever have you, it kills everybody who gets within 100 feet of it. So needless to say, you can't make nuclear weapons out of plutonium that contains those isotopes, okay? And you can't separate them easily either. There's no way to do that separation with humans involved in the process because, again, the ones that emit hard gamma and neutrons will kill anybody who gets anywhere near them. So you can't work with it, say, in like a glove box, okay, where you've got a box with, with gloves. You can't do that. It has to be entirely robotic. So nobody does this. You'd be out of your mind to do this. So if you're going to make weapons, you have to short cycle fuel. And obviously for a power plant, it only makes money when it's running. So you have to put uranium-238 into the reactor, you run it for a short period of time, you take it out, you extract the plutonium, you do it again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's how you get the plutonium to make bombs. But nobody does this with a reactor that's making electricity because it's off 85, 90% of the time if you do that. Well, you don't make any money doing that, and you don't make any power. So no one does that. Now, who does have facilities that are specifically designed to do this? Israel. Dimona does not produce any energy. No electricity at all. Now, there are peaceful reasons to short cycle fuel like this too. Okay, so got to be a little bit careful here.
They're making it in Dimona, you're saying? Because Dimona got hit this morning, I saw.
Well, of course, that reactor.
Did you see that? Purpose. You saw that, right?
Yeah. But that system over there has two purposes, neither of which is production of electricity for civilian use. You use it to make medical isotopes, like cobalt-60, for example, for radiation therapy. Okay, it's perfectly legitimate, peaceful use for nuclear reactors. And the second one is you make plutonium that you turn into bombs. Okay, so there you go. Now, Iran has a power reactor, Bashir. Okay, that is a power reactor, it produces electricity. You could make all sorts of dirty weapons with the waste material that comes out of there. Iran's has the ability to do that, and has had the ability to do that since they first put that unit online. There's no way to prevent that. And by the way, if you're worried about somebody poisoning the earth, okay, using a nuclear weapon in a way to do this, go ahead and set one off, just a regular nuclear bomb, 20 miles from my house. And unless I happen to be outside and get hit with the actual burst, the shine from the weapon itself, the odds are I survive. Not only do I survive, but in a couple of weeks I'm going to be able to come out, because very little long-lasting radioactive isotopes are produced by that explosion, because only the tiny little bit of that material that reacts produces those isotopes. On the other hand, a power reactor makes tons of these long-lived isotopes, all of which are dangerous. This is why we have this whole debate over Yucca Flats and all this other nonsense in the United States, because Jimmy Carter shut down reprocessing. The safest place to put that stuff is back inside a reactor and burn it up. It's the only sane thing to do with it. Jimmy Carter shut that down because he did not believe that we could safely use nuclear power at a civilian level in the United States, and we'd eventually all end up glowing. Okay, there'd be a bunch of 3 Mile Island kind of incidents, but they wouldn't be contained. They'd get out in the environment and they'd wreck the countryside. So he shut that down, believing that as that material started to accumulate, we would abandon nuclear energy in the United States. He was wrong. We didn't abandon nuclear energy. What we did was we just stockpiled the stuff, spent fuel pools, which is insane, because if that stuff gets into the environment, it will create an active denial area where you can't go for 10,000 years. So if you wanted to really screw somebody and you were Iran, you would take that spent material, you'd grind it up into a powder, you'd put it into a conventional munition, a shell or a missile or whatever have you. Now, you'd have to coat this thing in lead because, again, that stuff's so hot, radioactivity-wise, it would kill anybody getting anywhere near it. And then you fire it at somebody, and it sprays that crap all over the place. And that stuff's dangerous for 10 or 100,000 years, and there's no reasonable way to clean it up. So, I live fairly close downwind by 70 miles or so from a nuclear power plant. If there is ever a strategic exchange and that place is hit and that material gets spread around, that's the concern. It's not whether or not somebody drops a bomb on Knoxville. Okay, the real problem is if you hit that spent fuel pool and you spread that shit all over the place, you would have a probably 100 plus mile swath of I-75 between Chattanooga and Knoxville. You couldn't drive that road for 1,000 years because you would die. All right. And that's not from the bomb. That's from the crap that got spewed into the air from the plant. All right. So people have to understand that this trope about Iran was, about to build a nuclear weapon. If Iran wanted to build something that would absolutely screw Israel with nuclear waste, they got tons of it because they've been running Bashir for years. There's no shortage of that stuff over there. Never mind, if they really want to bomb, they just get it from Pakistan. Pakistan is a nuclear power, has nuclear weapons. And by the way, Iran and Pakistan, if you look at a map, they share a land border.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted, launched by McIlvaney Financial Group. The simplest and most affordable way to own physical gold and silver. Physical gold is the only asset outside of the control of the government and banking system. They can print dollars, but they can't print gold. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. What is this about then, in your view?
Well, so a couple things. One of them is that Bibi Netanyahu has publicly stated for decades, literally more than 2 decades, that he wants to see this particular brand of Islam disappear, and he wants, that Iran is kind of the axis of this. Okay, now it's true that Iran's mullahs have been funding terrorism all over the Middle East. I mean, that's not a lie. That's a known fact. They're going to make nukes trope is one of the oldest ones in the book, and it's an excuse. Okay, Israel, along with the rest of the Middle East, most of it anyway, has a very serious problem in general. Israel does not have much in the way of energy-based natural resources at all. Okay, this is a very serious issue because Israel also, along with the rest of the Middle East, does not have enough fresh water resource for the number of people that live there. If you take the entirety of the Middle East and you look at the amount of freshwater resource that is available in the Middle East from natural sources, the Middle East can support about 20%, maybe, of the humans that are currently living there. That's a problem. So the way they've solved this, I mean, you got to remember, Iran has nearly 100 million people. Okay, this is not a small country. People
92 million or something. What's Israel? 8 million? 10 million?
Yeah, yeah. No, Iran is, if you took Iran and overlaid it on the United States and aligned it kind of to the eastern seaboard, it would cover more than half of the landmass between the eastern seaboard and the Mississippi. It's an absolutely enormous hunk of dirt, and it has a crap ton of people living there. Okay, this is not a small little country by any stretch of the imagination, and that's a problem because, as people have found out, as we found out with the whole Ukrainian and Russia thing, sometimes numerical numbers, quantity is a quality all of its own, so to speak. The other thing is these people are not stupid Arabs that like to screw goats. They're Persians. They're quite intelligent, and on top of that, they've been at it with regards to war for 1,000 years or thereabouts, and they seem to enjoy it. Now, I don't know if that's technically true or not, but if you look at the history, it sure looks like it. Okay, that's not exactly a good recipe for anybody that happens to be on the wrong side of whatever it is that they're into today. Right? So I mean, this, I'm not making light of the fact that this is a real conflict. But the other side of it is that Iran is also a very mountainous nation. It's not a flat piece of dirt. And as I said, these are not stupid people. They have a substantial number of engineers among them that are quite intelligent. And, so the idea that you're just going to go in there and blow them all to hell and they're all going to say, oh, we surrender. Well, that appears to be what Trump thought was going to happen. Now, I don't know who gave him that idea, but if Trump is as intelligent as people claim he is, there is no way on God's green earth he could have possibly believed that. So, all right, so what's the real reason? Because I'll tell you what it's not. It's not that he's the smartest man in the room and he thought that he could actually pull this off in 2 weeks. That's not the reason. It's not why it happened. So why did it happen? I don't know. But now we've got a problem because, yeah, we blew up a lot of their stuff.
This is week 4, Karl. We're starting week 4 of this.
By the way, he's got 4 more, and then he's got to stop per the War Powers Act.
Would he stop, though?
He doesn't have a choice. The money gets cut off. Legally, he can't continue beyond the point at which Congress has to authorize this. He's allowed another I think he's got another 30 days to wind it down. So technically he could go 90. Technically. But he has to be pulling things out in another 4 weeks, roughly. And you know, there's reports that you've got a battle group maybe going to Karg Island. By the way, in case your listeners don't know this, Karg Island is nowhere near the Straits of Hormuz. It's on the far north end of the country. It is, however, the oil loading terminal that Iran uses for the vast majority of the stuff that comes out of there. Okay, so taking Karg Island is essentially an attempt to capture Iran's ability to load petroleum. Now, okay, how long do you intend to stay there? Because you got this problem with the War Powers Act. And Congress is going to have to authorize that. I'm not so sure it will, especially if the Marines that go over there start getting shot. And they might. So I'm not, you know, I think at this point he's basically abandoned the idea that he can get the Straits of Hormuz reopened on an unrestricted basis. And he's extremely pissed off that the NATO members and other people who actually use that material aren't rushing to help. Okay, he's very angry about that. Okay, well, guess what? That's what you get when you go in first and ask questions later, including, are you willing to commit to do this? Kind of the more important question, right? Is are you going to help us out with this stuff when it could? By the way, you're the one that needs these products. We don't. But the other thing that really got under my skin, and actually was probably the largest reason I flipped the flag over, is that the first thing Trump should have done, and he has the authority to do it under the DPA and other emergency related legislation, is ban all petroleum material and derivative exports from the United States on the day the first missile flew. And the reason for that is that we are essentially self-sufficient. We can provide our own energy resources, our own petroleum. By the way, natural gas is the primary feedstock for 2 absolutely essential things, one of them being fertilizer, and the second one being diesel exhaust fluid, which the EPA requires that all trucks made in the last 15 years or so use. Now, without those 2 things, we've got a serious economic problem. If he had done this, if he'd banned those exports, first off, you wouldn't have seen the huge spike in diesel and gasoline prices because our production would have stayed here in the United States. Okay, that's the first thing. Now, there's a potential problem with the urea production for DEF and for fertilizer in that I don't know how much of that material and those plants still are operational here in the United States, because, you know, just like everything else that we think is so wonderful to export to places like China, they have very cheap labor and don't give a crap about the environment. We've been doing a lot of that sort of stuff when it comes to these things as well. How much of that we can actually cover with capacity, industrial capacity in the U.S. today, I do not know. All right, I mean, I've seen estimates, but you got people on all sides of this. The first casualty of war is the truth. And so anyone that tries to quote a number at you is probably full of crap. All right. And unless you can verify it independently, you just can't run with those kinds of figures. And so I refuse to put any kind of a guess on it because I don't have a good one. All I've got is what somebody else told me, and they may be lying. But we have the feedstock. That's not in question. All right. So these are, look, when it comes to things like diesel fuel, if you think about this, Mike, if someone here in the United States would bid $3 a gallon for diesel here in the U.S. before taxes, okay, before road taxes and all that, because this stuff's all internationally traded commodity. But someone in Europe will bid $5. Who are you going to sell to? Okay. I mean, that's not complicated, right? I mean, the same thing with natural gas. If I can sell it here, or I can put it in an LNG tanker and ship it over to Germany. Well, why is it that we're subsidizing countries that have gone down the green energy scam and literally, in the case of countries like Germany, have shut down their nuclear power plants and blown up the cooling stacks so they can't be restarted? They put themselves in this situation where they're dependent upon the flow of energy out of that part of the world. And now we're supposed to cover it with our money as consumers in the United States because we voluntarily attacked another nation. We shot first.
That, in my view, posed no threat to the United States.
I won't go that far.
Okay. All right. Call me out.
I won't go that far because it is a fact that Iran has been funding terror cells all over the world. That is a documented fact. All right. On the other hand, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia funded a terror cell that came over here and killed 3,000 Americans. We seem to remember that, right? And blew up several of our buildings. We didn't flatten them, did we? All right. Why didn't we go over there, blow them to hell, blow Mecca off the face of the planet, and seize their oil to pay for the damage? We should have, but we didn't. So spare me this, this huge, there's this huge terrorism. Da, 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 da. We didn't do it when the last guy really did, no bullshit, attack America. It just happened to be somebody else.
Go ahead. Were you say something?
Yeah. So the real question here is the unintended consequences, right? I have long said, and this has been in the context of the idea of people rising up in the United States and overthrowing our government and let's reprise 1776, right?
V for Vendetta. I just watched. Not to interrupt you. I just watched V for Vendetta the other day for the first time.
Yeah.
I never saw that movie. You seen it?
I've seen it. And what kicks it all off is a little girl gets executed essentially, stupidly.
She was gay, I think, right? Wasn't that what?
Yeah, but I mean, there wasn't any reason to kill her. Okay, I mean that wasn't what the conflict at the time was about. It just happened to be the wrong face on the wrong body at the wrong time, and really bad things came out of that. All right. That's the problem with doing something like that. And what I've pointed out to people repeatedly who call for it, and I've said it's stupid and you should shut up, right, is that for every George Washington, history tells us you get 10 Hitlers. All right. Nobody's ever figured out how to get around that problem. By the way, we have twice gone into Iran and jacked with their government. In the 1950s, because the elected government of Iran seized BP's oil assets within the country following an election. British Petroleum, not an American firm, British Petroleum, we went in there and threw the Iranian government out, and that's the chain of actions that led to the Shah coming into power. Of course, that little bit of tampering ultimately gave rise to the Iranian Revolution. We all know what happened there. Our embassy gets seized, the hostages get taken, all of this. Carter tries to go get them. They run into bad weather. The mission fails. And then, for this odd reason, as Ronald Reagan is about to be inaugurated, they all got let go. Gee, you got to wonder what Ronald Reagan said he was going to do the day after, 5 minutes after he put his hand on the Bible. I have a suspicion what the mullahs were told. All right. I mean, I don't know, but I can guess. Okay. By the way, Tehran will be a glowing ball of gas. Yeah, something like that. Did he mean it? Doesn't matter. The bluff held, and there you are. But in no small part because of this, they've become a sponsor of terror all over the place. The funding source for Hezbollah and all of this kind of stuff. So we broke it in the 1950s. Originally, we were responsible for that because our CIA thought that they were the smartest people in the room, and they could just, we'll take care of that. We'll go get your oil assets back. Oh, yeah, that didn't work out so good, right? For how many years now have we put up with this shit? Well, this is about 70. And now we think we're the smartest people in the room again. We can just keep killing people that they elect or appoint to be their so-called supreme leader until we get someone we like. Well, we did that in the 1950s. It didn't work out very well. Now we live in a world where war is very easy to wage through unconventional and very cheap means. And we're getting some surprises. That F-35 that was hit, which, there was all kinds of speculation originally. Well, apparently, it really was, because the pilot apparently had shrapnel damage to his body. So that was not an accident. That was not, the plane malfunctioned. That was a weapon. That's very stealthy. Radar can't see it. That's all nice. Anybody ever pay attention to the fact that every single jet engine that operates has this really, really nasty plume of really hot exhaust gas coming out of the ass end? Okay. I mean, you don't need a radar to see that if you've got the people that know what the hell they're doing. You just look for things that are hot that shouldn't be. And that appears to be exactly what happened. By the way, we've had heat-seeking missiles on airplanes for how long? All right, right up your tailpipe, kaboom. So, I mean, and there's another problem with that too, Mike, which is that those detectors are passive. Problem with firing up a radar to look for something is that we're pretty good at building things that home in on radio signals and blow them up. We've made quite an art out of that. That's the whole thing about being able to dominate air defense and things like this. And that if you've got surface-to-air missiles and they use radar for targeting, as soon as you turn that radar set on, it eats a missile from us. Okay, which they don't work very well when they're scattered in a bunch of pieces all over the place. But if you've got something that's passive that doesn't actually emit anything, you can't see it.
I had Sal Mercogliano on the other day, and he's got a channel on YouTube called What's Going On with Shipping. I don't know if you're familiar with his stuff. But he was talking about from the standpoint of the Strait of Hormuz. He's like, what they should have done. He goes, I know it's easy to Monday morning quarterback this. He's like, but they should have made sure that thing was open right from day one. And he goes, now, people want to talk about insurance and Lloyd's of London. And he's like, it's not even that. He's like, the boats are just, nobody wants to go through it. And what is there, over 3,000 now that are just stuck out there? 3,600, 3,200?
Well, think about this. If you're a tanker captain, right? Okay, you have a very large vessel. It's full of very flammable cargo.
It's a bomb. Right? It's a floating bomb.
It probably won't explode. I mean, oil burns like hell, right? Once it gets lit, very hard to put it out. Not impossible. It's not like a lithium battery fire or something like that. You can put it out. You might sink your own ship doing it though, which is a problem because all the water has to go somewhere, right? But the thing is this, it's huge. Well, these crude carriers are not small. They're not, they move at a fairly decent rate, but they don't change speed or direction very rapidly. And so they certainly can't dodge anything that's shot at them. All right. So you're a sitting duck. The only thing you've got going for you, and this is one of the problems with even like if they were to have a military escort or something like this, say you put a destroyer on one, and and it's got anti-ship missiles or missiles that can be fired against land targets, whatever have you. Maybe there's some Tomahawks on there, maybe whatever. That's fine. The other guy still gets a shot at you before you can take out his missile complex. Okay, he's got 5 launchers over there. He shoots off 4 of them. You get the last one, but the other 4 missiles, can you shoot all 4 of them down? Well, what if you only get 3? Well, one hits the ship, all right, and sets it on fire. Okay, now you got trouble. All right. The other thing that's a real concern, and this was was something that has been brought up for a long time, is that channel is quite narrow and it's not straight. You have to make you're essentially executing close to a 270-degree turn as you go around that corner, around the tip, right? Because of the size of these vessels, if Iran manages to sink a couple of them in that strait, you may not be able to navigate through there safely. That water's not that deep. All right. Now, how many ships do you have to sink before that becomes impassable? And oh, by the way, if that happens, now you're talking about that passage being out of service for how long? How long it takes to clear that out and establish another safe navigation channel through there. That could be years. Probably would be years, actually. So, I mean, how real is this risk? I don't know, but if I'm a captain sitting on one side or the other and somebody says go through there, I'm going to say, are you nuts?
Well, and the other thing he brought up too, which I don't think they've started to use this yet, but the idea of mines in the water. Once that floats around, then no one is going to want to go down there, go through it.
Yeah, there's talk about them having dropped a few. What a lot of people don't realize about that part of the world is that the traffic through there isn't just crude carriers. Okay, I mean, that's what everybody thinks, right? Is that it's oil, it's oil products, it's fertilizer, it's basically the products of drilling. And natural gas. You've got the LNG plants up there, which, by the way, some of those have been hit now too. Those are offline.
Which will take years to rebuild at this point. And
well, Gutter says that about 15% of their capacity is offline.
You said Cutter, Carl? You said Cutter.
Gutter,
right?
Yeah. About 15% of their capacity is offline, and the time to fix that is probably measured in single-digit years. I would be shocked if they could get it back online in 12 months. I think you're probably looking at 2 or 3 years, maybe longer. And that assumes that nobody else shoots at any of the others, okay? Because it's all clustered in one area. It wouldn't be very hard to hit the rest of them if they wanted to.
And this is showing no signs of slowing down as we sit here today. Today is
yeah. Mike, I don't know, but this is the thing is there's all these claims, but there's no public, battle damage assessment is not a public thing.
It's hard to know.
Yeah. Who's telling the truth and who's lying? I don't know. All right. But what's rather obvious from the fact that we had an F-35 hit is that we don't have air superiority established. All right, that we have had those, now people are saying, well, they're running A-10s in there, which, those are slow. And they fly quite low. They're not hard to hit. If you can, an anti-aircraft gun can hit those. But the fact that we actually had one of our really, really expensive, high-dollar stealthy planes that was put out of action. A pilot wasn't killed, but I'll bet the aircraft is economically destroyed. even though he managed to get back to base and make a hard landing. But I'm willing to bet that thing's out of service on a permanent basis. The airframe's probably been critically damaged. So, this is one of the problems with asymmetric warfare. If you look at this and you say, well, what if I can build $30,000 drones, all right, that are completely autonomous once launched. They don't carry a whole lot, maybe 20, 50 pounds of explosive. Okay, not a lot of explosives, but some. And they can operate entirely on their own once they're in the air. All right. You build them with multiple redundant tracking systems to get to what they want to shoot at. GPS can be jammed, obviously, but an INU can't be jammed. And by the way, neither can cameras. And so, and this is all, the actual flight control systems for these things, you or I, we can go online, we can buy them right now. You can go on AliExpress and you can buy the controllers and for a quadcopter, $100. Right? This kind of stuff is not expensive anymore. I mean, that's a real problem, right? So now I build, let's say I build 10,000 of these things. And I shoot 500 of them at one of our carrier battle groups. And the goal of this thing is to get inside the flight deck, in the hangar deck, and blow up. That's all. And once it gets close enough to see the carrier, it doesn't need anything other than visual navigation in order to do that. Well, yeah, you've got layers of defense. You've got the Sea Whiz. You got missiles. You got all these things you can shoot at it with. But you got to shoot all of them. Now, are you going to sink a carrier if you get a few of those in there? No, but you're going to screw it up really good. And it's going to take quite a while to fix what you blew up. If you manage to catch it when they've got planes in there and there's fuel hoses running around, or God forbid munitions, right, you might actually do very serious damage as opposed to just making a mess. So I mean, this is not. How do did you ever see Star Trek Beyond, the last of the Kepler series, the new one, the new reboot?
The J.J. Abrams, the third one of those?
Yeah, the third one.
No, I saw the first two, but not the third one.
Okay, well, the third one, the Enterprise gets attacked by a swarm of drones, and the ship goes down. Okay, just because, yeah, we can shoot at these things. We got phasers, we got photon torpedoes, but you can't kill enough of them fast enough. Okay, and that's the problem.
Like gnats. It's like an army, like a bunch of gnats coming at you.
It's like being attacked by a swarm of yellow jackets or mosquitoes, right? I mean, yeah, you can kill a lot of them, but some of them are going to get you.
And their goal is not, this is what Sal was talking about too, their goal is not to blow the boat up itself, but cause enough damage where it's just not going to go anywhere.
Well, the goal isn't necessarily to, all you're really trying to do is make it expensive enough that the other side won't continue. That's, wars get fought until one side or the other gives up because they're either out of dudes, okay, or they're out of equipment, right, that still works. However you manage to break that stuff doesn't really make a lot of difference. And I don't think the people, whether Bibi basically, the narrative is that Netanyahu basically told Trump, I'm doing this. Are you coming or aren't you? I'm doing it whether you like it or not. All right. Now, I don't know if that's true or not true. But his option was always to say, you're a sovereign nation, you're entitled to do what you want. However, if you do it, we're sanctioning your ass. And by the way, every single one of our dudes that's over there that happens to have the encryption keys for all of our equipment, we're all leaving. Now that means you can't do IFF with us anymore because you don't know whose plane that is. You want to play that game? Go right ahead. It's on you. I don't think Netanyahu would have had the balls to try to do that under that set of circumstances. It would have been suicidal. But, I mean, I don't know. And I also don't know if that's the truth about what happened, or if what really happened is both Hegseth, as Trump's liaison, and Bibi and his guys got together, sat around a table, and said, "Okay, we're going to hit here, here, here." I I don't know which is the closer to fact. I don't know. But now we've got a problem, and oh, by the way, there's an economic issue that comes into this, in that, as you've probably seen, the market hasn't exactly liked this so far. All right. And everybody expected that the result of this was going to be a flattening of interest rates as people flew into treasuries as a safe haven. A lot of what people also thought, everyone was going to fly into gold and silver. God help you if you bought either one of them a month ago, all right? Because you're looking at a 35% loss in silver, all right, down from its top, even a little more than that, I think. That's a god awful loss if you were buying in there up around $100. That's enough to get a margin call and put you in the dirt. And the stock market is holding up surprisingly well so far, but it's not going to for very long, because anybody that thinks that there's going to be any kind of rate cut environment or lower borrowing costs into a spike in all of the input costs to produce things in the United States, including most particularly things like food and fuel, is out of their mind. All right, that is absolutely not going to happen.
So I want to talk about that, but first I want to come back and revisit what you were saying about fuel and fertilizer, because I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and older gentleman, and he's like, "Well, but United States, we're self-sufficient, right?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but we're in a world market now. This is a world market, and to your point, if you're offering something at simple numbers here. If the United States, if it's $3 and somebody overseas wants to pay $6, of course they're going to do that. And to this, you can't stop that now, or can you?
Well, you could, but Trump hasn't. Okay, could he? Yeah, he could have, and he should have right up front. Because the reality of it is, what are you going to do when and oh, by the way, the other thing that he could have done right up front, is he could have told all the corn farmers to go stick it in their ass that there wasn't going to be any more ethanol in fuel. Okay, because corn is extremely fertilizer intensive to grow. So the intelligent thing to do would be the sort of thing that America did during World War II, which is to prioritize the production of food that people put in their mouth. All right, not food that people put in their gas tank as a sop to a bunch of farmers, which, by the way, only works if you have cheap energy, cheap gas available to make the fertilizer in order to be able to grow all those rows of corn that you're then going to turn around and stick in people's gas tanks. That's insane. All right, that was nuts to begin with. There was an argument for it back when we had carburetors on cars, because the oxygenate actually does clean up the combustion. But with modern fuel-injected vehicles, it absolutely has no benefit whatsoever as far as air quality. None. And that's been true for 25 years.
How high do you see these? Before I ask you that, how does this miscalculation happen, Karl?
Well, it's because people don't, he's not the smartest man in the room. He didn't ask me what I thought of it before he went and did it. I would have told him these things. I would have said, if you're going to do this, assuming you think there is a legitimate national security argument for it. Okay, and I don't have access to classified information. I don't know. All right, but assuming that this is a decision you've made, you have to slam the door on any of that crap leaving the United States. You must. And you must do it at the same time. Can't go on for 5 minutes.
Now we're starting week 4 of this, and even if it ended today, we still don't know what the long-term consequences are from all this, and it's not ending today.
Well, if you shut it up, I mean, if Trump turned around and said, "Okay, we're done, we're leaving," okay. First off, what most people don't understand is that when you shut a refinery or a transportation pipeline down, you can't just turn it back on. Doesn't work like that.
It's not a light switch.
Well, you have to preheat everything, okay? Because a lot of this crude is now, a lot of the Iranian stuff is actually very light and it's very easily moved. But none of the industrial side of this is as simple as turn it back on and have everything back to normal in a day or a week or whatever have you. Even without the damage, you're talking about a restart process that might take a month. Now that's assuming everything still works. We seem to have blown an awful lot of it up. The stuff that's blown up is going to take a whole lot longer than that to fix. All right. I mean, we know that the situation with those gas pipelines, the trains, as they call them, that process it for LNG, that's a couple year period of time to rebuild those, the ones that got destroyed. Now, not all of that's offline, but a 15% impact to their production, that's not a small number. Okay, and the thing that everyone has to understand about economics is that if you want to burn 1 million barrels of oil today, every one of those 1 million barrels is going to cost whatever the last one cost to get out of the ground and get to you. That's just the way economics works. Everything is priced on the margin. It's always the last one you want to use. You've already got nations over in Europe that are talking about rationing fuel. Literally, not just by price, literally rationing it. All right. Now, the stupidity of countries like Great Britain, which has a huge amount of oil offshore in the North Sea, all right, an enormous amount. But no, we're all green. We have to use windmills. We have to use solar. You can't use that oil. Well, of course, they are using the oil. They're importing it. All right, and as I pointed out, Germany, let's shut down our nuclear plants. We'll get our gas from, we'll just use natural gas and we'll get it from Russia. Then, of course, Nord Stream gets blown up. Right? Oh, by the way, about that gas supply, all right, well, we'll just get LNG. We'll just have tankers come in. Oh, you will? Well, there seems to be a little problem with that now, doesn't there? All right. The further down the road countries went with this, and we've done plenty of that sort of stupid stuff, but not as much as others, the bigger the problem.
Does it feel like right now with the energy and the shortages and the gas and you've probably seen some of those videos of the TSA because they're still the ones that are working are not getting paid right now. Does it feel like COVID to you?
No, this is so. The TSA thing and the shutdown, this is political grandstanding that it's not a new trick. Okay, it's not a new game.
It's just bad timing.
Well, if you recall, when Obama was president, we had a shutdown because there was a dispute over the passing the budget bills. And Obama mandated that all the national parks close. Now, he didn't have to do that because in many cases those are self-funded from the fees at the gate. Okay, so there was absolutely nothing that said that was part of what had to occur. He did it to punish the American people so they would essentially force the Republicans to vote to reopen the government. And that wasn't the only thing he did in that regard. He did a number of other things that were very similar in character and nature. All right, this is a common tactic that happens whenever there's a dispute between the parties in Congress having to do with funding levels. And one side or the other says, not unless we get blah, whatever blah is. Okay, in this case, it's about this whole thing about, oh, no, we can't deport all these people. You evil bastard, you're arresting children and that didn't do anything wrong. And, you shot a woman who was a U.S. citizen. Yeah, she tried to run over a cop. Okay, I mean, facts are facts, all right? Now, the other guy who got shot, that looks like that was an honest mistake, but his gun was dropped and went off. All right, now if you're a police officer and you think somebody's shooting at you, and you have every reason to believe it because you just had a gun discharge, bad things are going to happen, all right? And if you brought a firearm to a protest, and I mean, I'm not saying he should have been killed, all right? I'm just saying that one. I don't see malice there. I see stupidity all the way across the board, primarily in the deceased's head, right? Thinking that there was nothing wrong with doing this. I mean, and I say that as somebody who I mean, if I think that I don't have any problem with anybody carrying, but if you do it into a place when you're going to screw with the police, that's dumb. All right, it's just dumb. But okay, so everybody's all ginned up on this stuff. Okay, fine, but and of course, the timing. All right, let's do this right into spring break. Right? I mean, no, it's not like there's a bunch of people that are going to want to get in a airplane, fly somewhere. Right? I mean, oops. Yeah. So, timing is part of the art of the deal, and sausage making in DC is always messy as hell. Uh, that too shall pass. The longer term impact of this stuff, though, from this situation over in Iran is a different thing entirely, because this is a cost push problem that we've created. We generated it. And the Federal Reserve is not going to lower rates into that environment, because you have and I've been warning, even before we started this, that there's a inflationary spike as a result of the fact that rates are below where they're still negative in real terms. Okay, and I put an article up a couple days ago right after the FOMC decision with what Powell should have said. Of course, he wasn't going to do it. But it's simply this: there has to be a cost in real terms to borrow, always. And the easiest way for the Federal Reserve to do that would be to say, okay, the current federal deficit is 7% of GDP. And those are facts. You just take a look at the debt to the penny number, you take a look at the GDP numbers, those are two figures, divide one by the other, a 7% fiscal deficit. Okay, fine. In order for that to be a positive, in order for borrowing to have a positive cost, the overnight rate has to be higher than that. 25 basis points, 50 basis points, not higher by a huge amount, but higher. So therefore, at every meeting until that is the case, we're going to raise rates. We're going to take whatever the differential is, the error that we currently have, we're going to divide by 4, and we're going to raise rates at every meeting until we get there, which would mean at the current deficit rate, overnight rate ends up about 7.5. Now, Congress can make that go down if they were to reduce their deficit spending to 3% of GDP, then the overnight rate would be 3.5%. Okay. If you don't do this, you get a vertical move, which we have now in interest carrying costs. The only option that the government has in that situation is to grossly curtail spending to a ridiculous level. And the longer you wait, the worse it gets, to ridiculously raise taxes, or you end up ultimately with the detonation of our society, because you go down the road of Weimar. And those are the only options. Now, here's the other thing, though, that goes with this, Michael, which is that, you saw this Doji thing that came out, right? This data dump that came out a little while ago. I ran some fairly preliminary analysis on this. It's not very hard to do. All right, I have a database server here. It's not an especially big one, certainly not compared to anything the government has. All right, I mean, maybe compared to what a lot of other people have on their desktop, it's quite a bit, but certainly it's a 10,000th of what the government has. It took myself and a couple of other people on my forum a very short period of time to take that, join that with the provider databases, and find what is a very clear signal of fraud in the billions of dollars. And even worse, when some of it was curtailed, like in Minnesota, the people who were doing it didn't stop. They registered new provider numbers in other states, including in Florida. And the reason we know it's the same person is they use the same phone number. Now, if you've got people, ordinary citizens like myself and some of the other people on my system and elsewhere, that found this in a matter of hours, and these queries that I ran that identified the original outliers, they took 40 seconds to come back. Okay, I mean, it took me a while to load the data, but once the data was actually in the database, a minute, 1 minute, not 10 days, 1 minute. Well, these people obviously don't care within the government, state and federal, both. They don't care. This is under their nose. It's trivially discoverable. And then you start sending the cops around, start arresting people. Go in there, do manual audits. Oh, by the way, you've got a hospice center that's got, supposedly 400 people in hospice. Where the hell are they? Right? Oh, there aren't any? Oh, you're going to jail. All right. But here's the reason they don't. And a lot of people are like, oh, this is, you can't be right about this. It's not possible. Nobody is that stupid. No, sure they are. Here's why. Let's say that you and I'm a provider of a good or a service, and you're a buyer. And you spend $10,000 with me. Maybe I sell beer. All right? Doesn't matter what I sell. Doesn't make any difference. Maybe I sell tax services. I do taxes for people, whatever. Okay. That entire $10,000 isn't mine. In other words, it has an operating margin because I have to pay all the input costs that went into whatever the good or service was that I provided, right? So if I'm making beer, I have to pay the power bill for the building. I have to pay for the hops. I have to pay for the barley. I have to pay for the water and everything else, right? The packaging and whatever have you. And the employees. If I steal $10,000, my operating margin is always 100%. And I spend every one of those $10,000 in the local economy. If I am operating a legitimate service or product distribution system, production system of some kind, I make 10%. That 10% gets spent in the local economy. But the stuff I sourced from Montana, that money leaves. It goes to Montana. So if you're a governor and people are scamming in your state, they're spending all the money they scammed in your state. Your GDP looks better. Now you know why DeSantis didn't give a flying fuck about the fact that all these people are putting roofs on buildings that don't actually meet code, but they're handing out windmill certificates that say they do. Because that extra amount of labor and that extra material, 100% profit to the person who did it, and he spends it in the local economy, and that makes Florida's economy look better, which works just great right up until a hurricane shows up and your house gets destroyed.
It's the whole economy is it's one big grift. It's just complete fraud across the board.
Well, here's something else to contemplate with this. Anytime a scam gets into a corporate environment, and all governments are corporations, when was the last time you heard a government or a company now talk about growth? Every single one of them, that's their prime directive, right? Is to grow. Okay. Let's say that your target is 10%. And you manage to steal 10% of whatever the program is. Let's say the program is to feed poor people. You steal 10% of it. You have a 10% growth target within your corporation, in this case, within the state government. Okay, that 10% that's stolen compounds as well. If you add absolutely nothing to the actual help to humans, in 10 years, the program is 170% of its original size. And the majority of it is stolen. In 30 years, it's something like 14 times its original size. And for all intents and purposes, all of it was stolen. This is why you have to jail every single person that pulls something like this, every time. You cannot allow it to go on, not for as little as 10 days. It has to be stomped on immediately, criminally. You don't just claw the money back. You throw people in prison. You have to throw them in prison, because if you don't, that's what's going to happen. Now take a look at the medical spending that we have in this country today. You have all these people screaming about how we've got all this great advances in cancer, for example. Just one example. Okay. So go online and look up the number of women who died of breast cancer in the year 2000. Just the raw number of women. Then look at up the number of women who died of breast cancer in 2025. 25 years later, right? We've made all these great strides. The number of women that died of breast cancer in 2025 should be much lower, right? What do you think it is?
Percentage-wise?
No, raw numbers. No statistical games, just a count.
I had no idea.
It's higher.
Oh, okay. I thought you asked for specific numbers. So yeah, I figured it was higher.
Not by a huge amount, but it's higher.
But it shouldn't be higher.
It should be a fraction of what it was. By the way, the amount of money we spend on it has
quadrupled,
okay,
probably, if not more.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Straight up. Okay? Now, if that one's not good enough, take a look at any of the other common cancers that kill people all the time. You'll see exactly the same thing. And they all run these statistical games to say, well, age-adjusted mortality is down by this much percent and whatever. All that means is they found it earlier. It still killed you. Dead is dead. I don't care why. All right? I mean, if you die of the same damn thing, what did they accomplish? Get another $500,000 out of you. That's what they accomplished. And we think this is progress. No, it's not. By the way, if you really want to get mad, look at cardiovascular disease. You would expect that to have dropped like a stone because far fewer people today smoke than used to.
They're drinking a lot less too, I've read.
And they're drinking less. Okay. Well, but smoking is like a really big one, right? Because that directly causes heart attacks. And we know that. All right. And strokes. Okay, fine. So, I mean, the evidence on drinking is a little murkier. I mean, yes, okay, it's bad for you, but, smoking, that one's easy. All right. So then tell me why we've had a huge increase. I mean, it went from like 500,000 a year to like 9 over the space of 15, 20 years. How in the hell is that possible? And I'll tell you what the answer is, Michael. It's that, yes, those positive changes happened, but nobody wants to look at the cause of those particular disorders. What else changed in the environment? Because that's not genetic. It's way too fast. All right, it takes 20, 50, 100 generations for a genetic change to filter its way through and cause those kinds of outcome changes. That's not genetic, it's environmental. Nobody wants to go there. No one wants to look at it. No one in the medical system will look at it. No one in the government will look at it. And the reason is because they make a hell of a lot of money off of it. And you're the one that gets the misery and bankrupted. The entire medical system is corrupt to the core. You would think, we've got this thing that's going around. You've probably seen the articles in the news. Colorectal cancer is all of a sudden showing up in people that are 30 years old. Okay, that's something that 20 years ago, that never happened. Okay, I mean, there's always the outlier, there's always the exception, but that never happened. Why is it happening? Wouldn't you think that would be one of the top priorities? What's the environmental change? What has been modified in our environment? What have we done? We've done something. What is it?
Experimental gene therapy, Karl?
Well, you know what? The trend was there before the shots.
Okay.
So for that particular event, no. But the overall, I mean, if you look though at the spend and the rates, there's still a huge excess death rate that just magically showed up right about the time that certain things started being injected in people's arms. And you would have expected that once those people that got it and got nailed by it, you can only die once. So you would have thought that it would have leveled out and, gone back to the baseline somewhere. I mean, hell, we're what, 5-6 years into this now. It hasn't. That's very bad because that implies a whole bunch of things, none of which are proved yet, but none of that trend line looks good. Now, does that necessarily implicate that as the cause? No, but it demands an answer, doesn't it? Unless the answer is the medical system wants to sell you drugs, wants to sell you procedures, and the more procedures and the more drugs you use, the more money they make. And the rest doesn't matter.
So was there any evidence, did it show any conclusion of why rectal cancer was on the rise?
I have theories, but I've got nothing to back them up.
Give me a theory.
The prevalence of seed oils and overconsumption of them within the human body, along with the presence of residues, particularly glyphosate, which has been used quite heavily as a desiccant. Using it as a weed killer before you put seeds in the ground probably doesn't end up with very much of it in your food. So the biggest risk there is likely to the farm worker. Oh, by the way, that's one of the reasons we love illegal immigrants, because they don't sue over things like this because they're not Americans. Gee, isn't that nice, right? The guy that's out there running the sprayer is probably an illegal. But there is a fair bit of use of this, not on a continuous basis, but on a sporadic basis as a desiccant for crops that are about to be harvested. Now that's a problem because that is almost certain to end up in the food supply in volume. Now, Europe classifies this as a probable carcinogen. Is it proved? No. But there have been some lawsuits for overexposure. The thing is, though, Michael, that like everything else, the dose makes the poison. Okay, I mean, you can kill yourself with water if you're crazy enough to drink enough of it. So there is a real question there as to what's going on here. But it's very clearly environmental, and I don't know precisely where the blame falls. There's a lot of possibilities, but without running some of them down, we're never going to get those answers. And nobody in the medical system, and by the way, for all those people who thought that RFK was going to be some kind of a savior in this regard, he hasn't done a damn thing about any of this. All right, absolutely nothing. You would think that by now, the research aim with these trends that are very clear here, the research aim would be to find the environmental causes of this. All right, I mean, I can tell you with absolute certainty because I grew up when you had chemical plants that just spewed all kinds of shit into the air. There was one not very far from my house. Every single time I rode past it in my parents' car, your eyes watered. All right, how much of a dose did I take of things that we knew were dangerous? Well, a lot. All right, that's all gone. You would have expected that the rates of disease and cancers and things like this caused by those exposures would have fallen like a stone. I mean, none of these. I mean, this stuff to some extent is almost like breathing gasoline vapors, for Christ's sakes. I mean, all of that's gone from the environment, all of it in the United States. Well, what the hell replaced it? Something, and whatever it is that replaced it, it's worse than what we started with. Because the kids today certainly haven't taken any of that exposure that I took.
I want to come back to the fall, what the consequences are going to be for the United States and how it's going to impact people like you and I
Yeah,
with what's going on in the Middle East.
yeah. I'm sorry, we got way off
No,
field.
that's okay. That's fine. No. It's how we always are, which is fine. I have this. I put this post on X a couple weeks ago where I said I've got this pre-COVID feeling, something like that, and it got over 264,000 views. I don't ever
Yeah.
have stuff that gets that kind of, not to that degree, traction. And other people would reach out to me about that and had the same feeling. Now I'm seeing it all over my feed right now.
Right, right.
With
Well, that's the way the algorithm works. Right.
so weird. But where my head is with all this rising gas prices, rising fuel, fertilizer, which you've talked about.
Hmm.
Even though the United States can produce a good bit of it, it's still a world market, right? A world economy. Do you see prices going so high where people are like, all right, I'm not going to fly, or a lockdown without calling it a lockdown? Because you're seeing it in other
Um,
parts of the world right now,
yeah, I don't
starting
see,
to.
I don't see that. What I see though is a very, and to a large extent, this is a result of the pressures that were already put into the system. Okay, so we have valuations in asset markets right now that are absolutely ridiculous, and they have been for the last couple of years. Uh, these things are manias. They're not driven by any kind of rational investment decision, any kind of rational evaluation. You look at what just happened with Supermicro. The one of the founders gets caught diverting NVIDIA chips to China. Okay, apparently he was arrested. So I go, I mean, it's an allegation at this point. It hasn't been proved, but he got arrested. So that was pretty good. And the stock just gets absolutely freaking hammered, right? Pummeled. Um, so you've got this kind of pressure that's in the system at present. And yet, all of that so called wealth effect that people like to talk about so much, the number of people, even in my own circle of folks, and I've been warning them for the last couple of years, and they think I'm a lunatic, okay? That, if you're 70 years old, you're in my kind of age bracket, 60-ish plus, and you've got a couple $1 million that is a clean double or a triple from where it was in the market, and you have structured your life around being able to pull, say, 100 grand a year out of that account for the rest of your life. If you take a 50% loss there, you're going to have to take that 100 a year and cut it to about 30 immediately, or you're going to run out of money. Now, if you happen to have bought 2 extra vacation houses and a nice RV or a boat or whatever have you on top of it, you can't do it because you've got notes on all that stuff. Okay, and you've got to pay those notes. So the repo man is going to come a knocking, right? So this is a large part of the problem, and a lot of this discretionary spending that holds up all this stuff. The $1,000 iPhones and things like this, and the $5,000 cruises, and people flying all over the place and this and that and everything. That's the edge of this sort of thing. The most likely outcome of this triggering event, because the asset markets and people's market expectations, and the stock market in particular, were that we were going to see, even in the face of crazy, 7% fiscal deficits, we're going to see 2% interest rates again, sometime in the next year or so. Right? I mean, that was as recently as a couple of months ago. That was the expectation that was buried into the markets. We're going to get 4 rate cuts this year. All right. Now, you're currently 3.5. All right. Well, that puts us into the twos, right? And, 25 basis point of crack. Um, that's off the table. If anything, the rates are going to go the other way. And you're already seeing the long end of the curve back up, which instantly shuts off the mortgage origination because now all of a sudden mortgages are more expensive again.
So you mean nobody's going to buy a house, is what you're saying?
Oh, they will. It's just that the prices are going to collapse.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening, Michael, is people hold out for a long period of time, but eventually someone has to sell. All right, because you lose your job, whatever have you, right? As soon as the first person does that, every other house in your subdivision gets revalued. And whether you like it or not, those asking prices all come down.
I think the same thing will happen in car relation to
Well,
cars.
Yeah, there's an interesting situation there. I don't know whether or not the automakers will respond to it, but they damn well should. The lifting of the endangerment fine, which is real, okay? Where the problem comes is that while that's been done by the executive, if you're going to change emission standards on vehicles, in other words, what you actually put on the car, all of which drives up cost, all this computer technology and connected car crap and all this other nonsense, this stuff's extremely expensive. It's not just expensive to build, it's expensive to repair, which also means that your insurance costs are skyrocketing for the same reason, because that screen that's in the middle of your brand new car is $4,000. Okay, if you get, if it malfunctions out of warranty, guess who gets to eat that, right? So I know people that have had one of these things go bad after a couple of years, and it's $1,500. All right, now, if you think about it, what does a little monitor cost for your desk? $100? I mean, why are these guys charging $1,000? Well, because they can, right? Because it's single sourced. So this kind of thing has to stop. And getting rid of the endangerment finding would allow a lot of this stuff to go away. Cylinder deactivation, a lot of this other technology that's in these cars that not only is expensive, it also damages their reliability and makes their maintenance and upkeep cost more by a lot. That would drop the cost of ownership and the cost of acquisition. Will they do it? Not unless Congress acts to formalize that, because otherwise, as soon as Trump leaves office, you get a Democrat back in there and all this stuff snaps back on. And they're not going to go ahead and make those changes in their product line only to have them be screwed a year or two down the road. That's not going to happen.
The only reason why I asked that in relation to what's going on, because gas prices are going up, which means cost of food is everything's going up. And
yeah, well, everything moves by truck at some level, right?
Right.
I mean,
well,
yeah.
and this country still has not fully recovered from 2020.
Yeah,
Not fully.
True to some extent. Yeah, the thing is that there's been so many of those dislocations were stupidity of our own part by offshoring production lines and things like this. And despite Trump's claims, absolutely none of that has been brought back here into the United States. Right? He's done nothing to actually make that happen.
And this reindustrialization that he was talking about, how much was that supposed to come from the Middle East? And if it was supposed to, what's the likelihood it's coming now after all this?
Well, we'd better do it, because what happens if those supply lines get severed again?
No,
right?
but I mean,
I don't.
But I'm not to interrupt you, but wasn't there money that was going to be promised from countries in the Middle East? That's got to be off the table now, I would think.
Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but I don't see that reindustrialization actually happening. I mean, all right, we're only a year and change into this, right? But I certainly don't see any evidence of it. And the other problem you've got is, one of the other things that we were promised was mass deportations one way or another, whether they be voluntary or otherwise. I pointed out that Biden's flood the zone tactics, along with Mayorkas, showed up in the BLS data set, the non-institutional working age population. Okay, now that's an uncorrelated data set that the government, they could probably twist that knob if they thought to do it, but it's the thing about uncorrelated data sets. It's one of the things that I used a great deal during the crazy in doing the analysis on a lot of that stuff. Okay, well, if it showed up for Biden's thing, then if Trump really deported 2 million people by voluntary means, the departure, his departure at CBP home or whatever the hell he called it, along with he claims 600,000 have been actually thrown out. That should have shown up in the data set too, and that rebase happens in January. Now this year, because of part of the shutdown bullshit, we didn't actually get it in the January numbers, but we did get it in the February ones. It's not there. The effective number of people that have left this country that were illegal immigrants is 0. Now, that doesn't mean it's really 0, because it's not, but it's below the threshold in which I can point to it and say, yeah, promise made, promise actually kept. People really did leave. And it gets worse. CNN has managed to get their hands on an internal data set from DHS. Now, I don't know how they got it, and they may be lying. However, that data set says the real number is 60,000. Now, that's below the threshold that I could reliably detect within the BLS data set, but it happens to be exactly what I observed. Now, you were told 2 million. The real number is an effective 0.
All this happening right now, do you think they even care about the midterms?
Well, they're going to get clobbered.
But they had to have known this, Karl, right?
Well, I don't, I think, again.
Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. Sorry, I don't mean to keep cutting you off.
No, Michael, war, has gotten presidents reelected. Okay? Has been a positive force in American politics in the past. The problem is you have to actually succeed, or at least be able to say you did, right? If we end up having done this and go home with our tail between our legs, that does not bode well, especially if in the process you end up with a 7% inflation print in October. All right, which by the way, looks like that might happen. All right, I mean, you're already at over 3. And we haven't seen any of this flow through yet. The numbers that are in the PPI data set are 6 months behind, and they do not look good at all.
We have talked, we talked before the election. We talked leading into Trump getting the inauguration.
Mm-hmm.
We just talked a couple of months ago. Where we're at right now, can you believe where things are right now?
It's one thing to bluster and bullshit and to get the job. The problem is then you've got the job. Okay. Now you have to deliver. The gotcha politics game has been going on for an awfully long time in DC. It's only gotten worse. It's the back and forth between people like Hakeem Jeffries and everybody on the other side. I mean, Jesus, our current speaker and all this. Then you've got the really legitimate question with all this Epstein stuff. Who's actually running the show here? Who's the tail and who's the dog? All right, and then on top of that, now you've got a very legitimate question as to did Bibi Netanyahu essentially order the United States military into Iran? I mean,
that's the perception, right? That's the general. The public's going to look.
Michael, there's an awful lot of people that are going to tell you that's exactly what happened.
And the public, to me, does not have the stomach for this war. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's me, but most people, I would think, they don't want this. They don't want this war. They didn't ask for it.
Well, I will tell you this for sure. If the Iranians manage to hit one of our ships, okay, shooting down an F-35, the pilot lives, he gets hit by shrapnel, whatever. Okay, it's one dude. There's 10 of our guys that are under a missile when it lands on something and they get blown up. We've had a handful of these dignified transfers, right, which is basically from that. You have an aircraft carrier that gets sunk. I think public opinion goes hard against like 5 seconds later. Okay, or any kind of truly successful, action against U.S. military assets.
I mean, they're against the war. You mean is this what you're saying?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I don't think the result of that is rah rah rah, go over there and kill them all.
I don't think it's that now though.
No, it's not, but I don't think you could turn it into that if, for example, we had that kind of an event happen. I
What
don't think that would happen. I think it would go the other way.
what could turn it into that though, in your opinion?
I don't know that there is a way to do it
It's
at
not.
this point. I just don't, what's our, how do you sell it to the American people that we ought to go over there and do this?
I just think after 9/11, people were racing to enlist after 9/11.
Yeah, but are they now?
No, that's what I mean.
Well, that's exactly the point, right? I mean, I had friends of mine that were like, I'll go kill every single Muslim, after 9/11, right? Oh, by the way, if they'd gone over there and they blasted KSA, I would have that would have been good for some shots. Okay, I would have offered toasts to that because, as far as I was concerned, where the money came, I'm always a money guy, right? It's all I trace the money, I'll find you the incentives. So as soon as I found out that the funding path went through there, which didn't take very long, I mean, as soon as that became evident, I'm blow them all to hell. I'm all for it right now. I'll go do it. I'll push the button.
But you think even something similar, if something similar to were to occur, that wouldn't even be enough to change sentiment like it did back then.
Well, how do you? Who's going to do that?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
first off,
you've heard like the false flags that they've speculated on, and
well, okay. So let's just, for the sake of argument, as a thought exercise, let's say that some Iranian-linked group gets a dirty bomb into the United States, which would not be very hard to do. I mean, we like to think we've sealed our border. We really kind of sort of haven't, right? Sails it up in a small boat, small by ship standards anyway, up the Potomac and sets it off, or up into New York Harbor and sets it off. Pick a location, right? I don't know if that would put us in a mental mood as Americans to actually bullshit prosecute a war. And furthermore, we've got another problem, which is that if we decided to do it, with what would we do it?
we don't have the resources.
Well, we've used up most of our interceptors. By the way, if we actually decide to prosecute a no bullshit war, you're talking about a rate of fire and a rate of activity that's what, 10 times what we're doing now? We don't have the material. How long would it take us to build it? I don't know. Do we even have the steel plants in the United States from which we could source the metal?
Well, and then the soldier aspect, right? I mean, how long would it take to formulate a draft? And
Well,
how well would that work?
okay, Michael, if people were really behind it, you wouldn't have to formulate a draft. Okay, you'd have every swinging dick in the recruiter's office. All right. Now, of course, there's another problem, which is that something like 70% of our young men are unfit for service. They literally can't run, 2 miles. You can't do it. All right. What are you going to do? How are you going to prosecute a war when you can't actually put the boots on the ground? By the way, you can't take territory by bombing it. You have to put people there. Even if it was just Iran, the size of that, you talk, we have neither the men or the material to do that right now.
Do you think they will end up doing that though, Carl?
I think they're going to try to take Karg Island. I think that's at least, I mean, if Hegseth and Trump are not musing that around, then the movements that they're making right now in terms of, the littoral ships and things like this don't make any sense, right, with the Marines on them. So I do think they're contemplating that. But Karg Island is not about reopening the straits. Karg Island is about seizing their export capacity. And what I find very, very curious is that at the same time that we're doing this, we've all of a sudden decided to let Russia sell some of their oil into the market again. I thought Russia was the bad guys because we were trying to strangle them with regards to Ukraine. So now all of a sudden we're going to let them have a few $1 billion in oil revenue?
You think this war is going to expand out beyond the Middle East?
That's the place that legitimate fear comes in.
For you?
Yeah, yeah, because it could. Um, you know, what we know at this point is that some of the drone and missile technology that Iran has fired against us came from China. Now, my understanding is that when it comes to their defensive stuff, the Iranians are kind of pissed off that it didn't work nearly as well as what the Chinese told them it would. Oops. Yeah, you gave us $10 billion and you bought a bunch of firecrackers instead of actual useful munitions. That kind of sucks, you know. I'd be pretty pissed off if I was in that position too. But the other side of it is that you learn a lot from actual combat. Tests a lot of times they're not real. Okay, you try to simulate things, but you actually don't learn until somebody's actually shooting at you. Then you find out how good that stuff really is. But it does appear that some of this so-called much vaunted technology of war that other parties have had isn't really as good as everybody has been told and has feared. All right, that we still make the best bang bangs, and this supposed ability to interdict all this stuff, maybe not so much. On the other hand, you have some successes, which is reason to give pause. I mean, this 35 that got hit, apparently by passive infrared sensing, that's something to be thinking about in the grander scheme, because there is no way to detect that until you get shot by it. And that is a serious problem. Now, how in the hell our guys in the Pentagon didn't realize that this was very likely to be a factor? Or they did and ignored it because it was convenient for somebody that was making $10 billion a plane or whatever the hell that thing cost.
Yeah, because you have Saudi Arabia, Dubai. I mean, the potential for other countries in the Middle East to jump into this, and then now with Diego Garcia.
Yeah, the thing is that how many of these? This is the basic problem that all the Gulf states have. Okay, and by the way, it's the same problem all of our country has too. All right. Last weekend, I ran a road race down in Knoxville, and my car was in one of the municipal parking garages. I go walking back to the car, and just on the other side of the garage, which I can look right into, is a substation that serves a good part of the city. Not all of it, by a stretch of the imagination. It's one of many, I'm sure. Somebody tosses a bomb in there. All right. Not exactly very hard to do. It's not a hardened facility. None of this stuff is in infrastructure, in our country or most other places. This natural gas plant that got hit, same thing, right? You start cooking off weapons and start blowing things up. All of a sudden, all that stuff gets targeted. Now, how many of those countries want to put that marker on the table? They can't defend it. It's just there's too much of it, and it's too dispersed. And like I was pointing out with the water situation, you put me you make me a general. My job is to bring one of these countries to their knees. I blow up all their desal plants. That's the first thing I hit. Because that'll take the stuffing out of you real fast when you don't have anything to drink.
What do you think the United States will look like by the end of the year here?
Well, I think this is it hasn't gone off yet, but I think this is a major trigger in the asset markets generally. Okay, I was calling for my annual prediction ticker for a fairly substantial decline here for this whole thing to come apart. I didn't know what was going to set it off, but just where things are is extremely fragile. You've got that. You've got the private credit situation, which appears to be a serious issue. You've got all this AI garbage, which nobody's making any money on, but they're
We talked
spending money
about
like crazy.
those data centers, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's making any money on it, but they're spending money like crazy. At some point, you have to make a return on investment, and then you have on top of that the fact that corporations and governments do not pay debts off; they roll them over, and the financing costs on those rolls is going up very rapidly. All of those things together portend very bad things economically. So I would expect that what we're going to get out of this is a quite severe recession. It's going to whack asset markets. This portends very bad things for the Republicans in the midterms, because I don't see how they avoid that happening prior to prior to November. I just don't. I mean, they've put those costs into the system. They're going to filter through. There's any way to get around it, right? I mean, and the other thing that's very alarming is oil futures. When this first started, they were showing an expectation in the marketplace that you would have oil back into reasonable price levels somewhere around August. Okay, so they were not expecting a long-term dislocation in oil prices. That's what the futures, just the trend line from the different contracts. Because you see the oil quote, like on CNBC or whatever. What most people don't understand is that you can actually trade in contracts that are not the current one, but are way out over time, usually a year or two out. Okay. Now, all the way into those contracts that are trading today, into the future for the rest of the year, you're seeing highly elevated prices. And in fact, you're seeing prices that are somewhat elevated out into the middle of next year. So traders have now, and these are people that are placing billions of dollars of bets behind what they're doing. Okay. I mean, if they're wrong, they get it up their butt. They're convinced that this is not a short-term situation at all. And that, I mean, right, I've seen people saying we're going to see $4 or $5 average gas across the United States. I don't know if that's, if that's real or not. But you've already got $5 diesel pretty much everywhere. All right. If that ends up being $6 or $7 and it stays over $5 well into next year, I don't see how you avoid a serious recession. And the carriers that are already in under economic stress and are doing all kinds of screwball stuff, I mean, all this nonsense with the non-domiciled drivers and things like this, those guys are dead.
And the airlines, right? You book a flight today.
Well,
what will the price of fuel be by the time, let's say you book it 90 days? Let's say the flight takes place 90 to 120 days from now. I could see a scenario where flights get canceled, no?
Well, okay. Remember that anybody that's got an actual use for this stuff can hedge that with the futures markets. That's the whole reason the futures market exists. Okay. But what that means is the price is going to go up and it's not going to come back down because I had to pay for that hedge. I want to make sure I have the fuel available. The more important thing is the fuel going to be there? Now, I don't think we're going to see shortages of that kind, but I do think what we're going to see is very high prices. And I don't see anything in transportation coming down. The fertilizer situation is very serious. That's going to filter through the supply chain from a standpoint of groceries. I don't know how in the hell you get inflation back under control when you've got these cost push elements that are in there. They're not going away.
So you don't see food shortages or gas shortages at this point?
Not in the United States. Overseas, perhaps. Yeah. But not here.
What if this thing persists?
Well, again, we can be self-sufficient. Okay, at some point, somebody's going to have to put their foot down and put the cork in the bottle in terms of this stuff leaving the U.S. They're going to have to. But that's not going to do anything about the price. Okay, I mean, at the end of the day, you hit people's ability to pay, and on top of that, you have a credit market that is tightening up, and the cost of interest is rising rather than going down. You're going to get a recession, and it's going to be a big one. I don't see how we avoid it.
When you say big recession, any time frame, any time period you compare it to?
I think it could be as bad as the oil shock from the 1970s. You're talking about a situation that, with valuations where they are today, you could see 70% come off the markets.
What about 2020 and 2021? That shock.
Well, that was an exogenous event, okay? That wasn't so much about the inability to produce. It was about the fact that, God and everybody thought that stupid idiots believed that the Chinese were telling the truth. They're showing videos of people falling over dead in the middle of the street. By the way, that never happened. You know that,
It
right?
was like the Omega Man. It was. Do you remember the? Do you remember the movie The Omega Man?
Yeah, it pretty much was, or 12 Monkeys, right?
Never saw
Um,
that.
and yet, was anyone ever held accountable for that bullshit?
No. Well, this is what I tell people. I've had conversations with people that have said they thought Fauci was going to be held accountable. They thought Obama was going to be held accountable.
Never
Uh,
happened.
well, in 2008, nobody was held accountable for any of that.
Yeah.
Who
By the
died?
way,
Somebody died today. John Brennan died today.
yeah, no, Mueller. Wasn't it Mueller?
Mueller
I
died
think it was
today.
Mueller. Mueller. Yeah.
Not,
Well, burn in hell, asshole. Uh,
why did I
okay,
say
that'll
John
make
Brennan?
me.
John Brennan's the head of the CIA, isn't he?
Well, was. I don't know if he is anymore.
No, Ratcliffe's the head of the CIA. Sorry.
Yeah, it's Radcliffe. Yeah, but no, I mean, yeah, the politicization of things, the Mueller thing in particular was especially galling because it was later proved that all of the so-called Russian collusion was bullshit, that it was fabricators, false. And not only was it false, but anybody who supposedly is a prosecutor and is looking into this stuff should have been able to determine this, okay, if they cared. But you have people that are so, and this is on both sides of the aisle now, though, right? I mean, everybody's, oh, those damn Democrats. Well, guess what? It's on both sides of the aisle now. All right. So, this cycle is not going away. And you just had Pritzker say that he's going to start throwing it. Yeah, we get back control of Congress and everything. We're going to start throwing all these Trump administration officials in jail. Excuse me? For what? Okay. Well, the for what part didn't seem to stop them from trying the last time, did it?
Yeah, I don't think people realize kind of where we are in terms of the economic, where this. I mean, I don't know where this is heading, but what I also find interesting, there are people that are like they literally are supporting and cheering on what's going on, what's happening right now, and they think this is a good thing for the United States. What's happening in the Middle East? I don't see it, but
I have absolutely no idea how anyone in their right mind thinks that there's anything positive that comes out of this for the U.S. I just don't see it. And if the logical thing that you're going to see out of Iran ultimately is they didn't have a nuclear weapon before, they're going to have one now. How many bombs have we dropped on North Korea since they set one off?
so last question. Maybe I asked you this earlier, but so I apologize for repeating myself. How much longer do you think this conflict will go for?
I think that there's a fork in the road here, and we can see it at this point. One is that Trump declares victory, just like George Bush did right on the deck of the carrier. You know, yeah, we did it. Um, he did no such thing, of course, and we won't have this time. Uh, that probably produces a very hard break with Israel, with Bibi. And there'll be downstream ramifications of that are very serious in that regard. That's bad. What's worse is that we actually attempt to engage in some kind of ground conflict. We get stuck over there. And if you think the gridlock we have over government funding is bad, you ain't seen nothing. Because in order for that to go on and to go forward, Trump needs congressional approval, or he's going to have to stop.
But I feel like won't they keep it because you can't risk the lives of troops?
Well, maybe, but that's also where the risk of something really ugly that isn't exactly organic comes from too, because desperate people do stupid things.
What's the United States breaking off from Israel? To me, that might not necessarily be a bad thing. What do you see the consequences of that?
I think it would be a very good thing.
Oh, okay. Make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, no, I think it would be a very good thing. Okay. But the political ramifications here in the United States, given the influence of AIPAC and the number of congressional people who have gone over and banged their head on the Wailing Wall, and the internal political disruption from that kind of a rupture is likely to be pretty extreme. I don't know how that plays out internally. I don't think we should have allowed this to happen in the first place. I've said this many times. AIPAC should have been required to register under FARA because they absolutely are. Okay, they absolutely are covered by that law, and that would put an absolute stop to all the bullshit that goes on with them funding campaigns and things like this. But I mean, if that's all that you got out of it, I think it would be positive. But I suspect it gets much nastier internally within the American political landscape than that, if it happens. I mean, the simple reality is that Israel is a very small country with a relatively small population and very little in the way of natural resources. So how does it generate a internally self-consistent everything that a nation needs? Because that's what would have to happen. I don't know how that happens.
And how does it require so much attention from a country with a population of 350 million people?
Well, because that's, we in Britain created that pretty much out of whole cloth. And, so I mean, it's been an unquestionable element of American politics for how many years now? All the way back to World War II.
You think a country like Dubai, what's the future of Dubai and Qatar?
Dubai, think about Dubai. What is Dubai other than a rich man's playground, right?
Disneyland for adults.
Yeah, it's Disneyland for. I mean, think about that. Why does Dubai exist in the global economic structure of things? What do they make?
But you know what though? It's built on money, so they'll rebuild it.
Well, okay, as long as it's there. But there's an old saying. My father rode a camel. I drive a Mercedes, but my son's going to ride a camel. Needless to say, that isn't going to be a pleasant state of affairs in terms of the transition if it occurs.
Where can people find you, Karl?
Market-ticker.org.
So much for an hour conversation, huh?
Yeah, well,
we got a lot to talk about. We didn't even get through everything either.
You know what? Funny how that happens every time we do one of these, right?
Well, that's why I don't even do any pre-talk with you anymore, because what's the point, right? Because you have to just go.
It's all good.
I appreciate you doing this. I know it won't be that long before we talk again. I mean, God only knows, probably a week from now, we'd have a whole brand new 2-hour conversation of things to discuss. So
I think the economic side of this is actually the most fascinating because, this appears to have blown up in everyone's face in terms of, I can't imagine that Trump believed that he was going to end up with a Federal Reserve chair who got up at the dais and not only said, I'm not leaving until you get done investigating me, which that was no big surprise. But in addition to that, the rest of the committee, not just the chair, but the rest of the committee basically said, okay, no more of this bullshit with rate cuts because we've got cost push elements going into the system and we do not know how long they will last or how bad they will be. But we know they're there. I don't think he anticipated that at all, but he should have. But the evidence is he didn't.
We'll see what happens. Thanks, Karl.
Yes, we will. Yep, anytime. Take care.
Mic drop.